There are few things as comforting as a warm fire on a clear summer night. But the skill of fire building is not just for fun. Fire holds its own as number 3 on the top 4 priorities for wilderness survival. It can help save your life, keeping you warm, purifying water, cooking food, signaling for help. There are lots of reasons to master the skill of fire building, and understanding how fire works is the first step. Fire is a chemical reaction called combustion. This reaction has a simple formula: heat plus oxygen plus fuel equals fire. When you're having a hard time keeping a fire going, it will always be an issue with one of these variables. You may need to increase the level of heat, oxygen, or fuel to create a self-sustaining campfire. Preparation is key to success with fire building. I am going to say this over and over during this video. You must prepare ahead of time before you begin this process. Once you start this reaction, it's too late to get ready to build it up. As a rule of thumb, get 3 times more than you think you will need. It's far better to have too much than not enough wood to burn once you get this fire started.
So when you're looking for a place to build a fire, if you don't have an existing fire ring, be aware of what the ground is made of where you're going to be burning. Like here in the Pacific Northwest, the ground is largely made of really highly flammable material, like layers of pine needle and moss and everything. So I'm actually going to put down a layer of flat rocks as our base layer so that it doesn't burn down and down and down. That's actually one of the big problems with forest fires, especially in this area, is they can burn underground for days and sometimes even weeks after the fire is out on the surface. So we're going to do a small fire today and just have a small ring. We're going to have the flat rocks. You can use sand, you can use gravel or other materials that are non-flammable for this base layer.
When you have a campfire going, make sure that you always keep safety in mind. Keep water handy nearby to be able to put out any sparks that catch nearby. When you're done with the fire, make sure that it's out dead cold. And if you've had to create an improvised fire ring, please remove the rocks from the area and put them back so that it doesn't look like there has been any fire there. The first level of fire building material is tinder. This is the finest, softest, quickest burning material. Think dry grass or shredded tree bark or pine needles, things like that. This is great for taking that small ember and turning it into a flame. But if you only have tinder to burn, it won't last very long. You need to use this to ignite larger sticks that can sustain themselves and burn longer. You'll want to take this really light material and make essentially a bird's nest. And in the very center of the nest where the egg would go, you put the softest, fluffiest, most flammable stuff right there. I like to take bark or grass and really work it with my hands and work all the fibers apart so it's really, really fluffy for that center piece.
If you want to know a secret to a dynamite tinder bundle, use what I like to call nature's napalm, or pine sap.
You can add it to the bundle once it's burning, or you can put it in beforehand. Just make sure it's not at the very center of the bundle. That's where you need the softest, most fluffy material to be able to catch that flame. Pine sap requires an active flame to be able to catch fire, but once it does, it burns hot and it burns for a really long time. You can find wood that's naturally dense in pine sap. It's called fat wood. Thin shavings of this make an amazing transition from tinder to kindling. You can often find this in rotted pine logs. Because the sap preserves the wood, everything else around it rots, leaving this solid core of fat wood in the middle. It will still be firm and it smells kind of like pine sol cleaner. That's how you know when you found it. As a bonus, because it's so dense with sap, it's practically waterproof as well, which makes it a great asset in wet climates. The second level of fire building material is called kindling, and it starts with thin pieces of wood shavings and moves up into pencil-sized twigs and then even sticks maybe an inch in diameter or so. Try to get wood that is as dry as possible. If you have damp wood, your best choice is to cut the pieces as thin as you can. The heat from the growing fire will help the water evaporate, and pretty soon it will dry out and burn pretty well.
So one of the biggest challenges you can run into, especially in a wet climate, is finding dry kindling. One of the places that I like to look is actually under trees. You can find little branches, even attached to the tree sometimes, that are dead along the bottom. They're up off the ground, so they're going to be more dry, and they're also covered up by the canopy of the tree. One of the ways to test to see if it's going to be dry enough is the snap test. If you can get it to snap, it's going to be a lot drier. See that one? That one just bent. That one bent in half. That one's probably not going to be very good. But some of these, if it snaps, yeah, you can work with that.
If all the twigs you're finding are wet all the way through, try going to a thicker branch. The center of a dead branch is more likely to be dry than the outside. So split the branch into quarters and then shave thin slices of drier wood from the inside. One of the most important things to remember at this stage is the heat to fuel to air ratio. At this stage, you can also add more air without risking blowing it out. So if you put on a little too much wood and it's having a hard time catching, you can gently blow on that tinder bundle and really bring it to life and get that heat level up higher, which will help catch that kindling. Once you have the kindling burning strong, you can start adding small logs and build up to as large as you want. If you add logs that are too large and it starts to go out, you'll need to go back down that ladder and add more kindling again. And when in doubt, cut wood down to smaller and smaller sizes to be able to burn more easily. If your fire is smoking and popping a lot, it probably means your wood is a little bit damp. If you have logs that are damp, put them next to the fire or even on top of the fire to help dry them out and evaporate some of that water off. All of this really is kind of a dance figuring out that balance between heat to air to fuel ratio. Every kind of wood burns a little bit differently. Pine and other soft woods are going to burn more quickly than oak or any other hardwood. If you need a campfire that's going to burn all night and you only have pine available, you're going to need a lot more wood. There are a lot of different techniques for building long burning campfires. An upside down campfire works, for example. You build a stack of split logs and then you put the kindling and tinder on the top to start it. Eventually it will burn down lower and lower and lower as the night goes on. You can craft a self-feeding log ramp that allows logs to roll into the fire as they burn farther down. Or if you don't have an axe or a way to process firewood, you can slowly push a log into the fire as it burns down lower. Obviously, this version requires you to tend to the fire more carefully. There's also a Swedish fire log technique that stacks logs for a long burning time.
All right. So now that I've got this going, I'm going to put this pine sap, these chunks of pine sap on top of it, and that's going to sustain that tinder bundle a lot longer. And then I'm going to add these shavings. Now, one of the secrets of this is to make sure that fuel to air ratio stays right, because you can still smother it at this point. Look at those good flames. That's going to catch these thin shavings really, really easily, really quickly. So I can be adding the kindling on now. This is such a small fire pit, I'm actually just going to kind of lean it over the edge. This would usually be where I would use more of like either a teepee or a log cabin style structure, but in this case it's so small, I'm just going to kind of pile it. And then as this grows, I can start to use larger pieces. And eventually, once I get like a nice bed of coals going, I can start using pieces that are much bigger. Obviously, with such a small pit, I'm not going to get much bigger than this. That would be my largest size today. Well, I hope you learned something today, and I hope you get outside and try it. Really, the best way to learn how to do it and to be successful is to try it. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it, and hopefully someday you'll be able to pass it on to somebody else and teach someone else how to do it. Let us know how it goes. Come back, tell us what you learned, and have a great time out there.